and very grateful to be here. And thank you all for being here and being a part of our very first meeting. I think I'm hoping this will be a really productive and informative and good, meaningful opportunity for everyone here tonight. So again, just by way of introductions, my name's Adam Shoulder. I'm here on behalf of A Gap in the Forest, and my co-facilitator for this meeting is Elizabeth Stevens from NAMI West Los Angeles. Elizabeth, I know you have a couple of announcements, so I'm going to hand it off to you to maybe go through those announcements, and then I'll go through some of our group guidelines.
Great, thank you, Adam. And I also want to thank Adam for bringing this idea to our office. I think this is such a wonderful resource. Over at NAMI Westside LA, we offer both family services and peer services. So I think this is a really great opportunity to bring those worlds together and be able to hear each other's perspectives. So I'm really excited to see the conversations that come out of tonight. Again, my name is Elizabeth Stevens. I'm the program director for NAMI Westside Los Angeles. I know some of you probably found out about this program through our support groups, but in the chat, I'm just going to put the link to our virtual support groups. We run 3 weekly family support groups on Zoom. Adam leads one on Thursday evenings, and we also run 4 weekly peer support groups, which Jared is also runs 3 of. So if you're looking, or if anyone in your life is looking for peer or family support, please head to the chat. We also have free classes, and we actually have an upcoming peer class. So peer classes are for anyone living with a mental illness, taught by peers who are trained in NAMI's model of facilitation. I personally love the peer classes. I have taught them 9 times now. I think they're a fantastic program. Every week goes over some aspect of living well and coping with mental health condition. And if you're interested in signing up, they start next week. We're going to have a Tuesday class and a Thursday class. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. I would be happy to talk with anyone, to talk with anyone's loved ones. Again, this is a peer class, so people living with mental illness, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the rest of our programming. And with that, I'm very excited to hand it over to Adam to get this event kicked off.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to very quickly start here by sharing my screen and just going through just a few group guidelines for this evening. And you know, again, if you are in any of our family or peer support group, you're probably familiar with these, but these are just the guidelines we really do like to follow. And this is really just so everyone feels comfortable and safe in this group. And they're really all just based out of mutual consideration and acceptance and respect for everyone in the group. So, you know, we started a few minutes late because we wanted for everyone to get here, but this will run through 8 p.m. and we will aim to stop at 8 p.m. tonight. As always, just being respectful and mindful of others in the group. So we do want to avoid crosstalk and interruptions and make sure that everyone has time to contribute in the meeting. We do ask for confidentiality, so a lot of the things that we discuss in this meeting, you know, we really want to keep in this meeting. And of course, we're here to, you know, empathize with everyone's situation. A big part of the reason that we have our support groups and groups like this to really just, you know, mutual understanding, respect, and empathizing with everyone's individual situation. A couple Zoom related guidelines that we like to follow is I do ask that everyone keep their microphone muted except when speaking. It just helps to avoid some of the background noise that can sometimes pop up. And of course, if you do have something to say and want to jump in, you can raise your hand, you can raise your virtual hand, you can put something in the chat box as well. And like I said a few minutes ago, if at all possible and if you're comfortable doing so, do ask that you keep your Zoom video on. I understand if you're driving or finishing those last bites of dinner, no worries, but if at all possible, I would ask that of everyone. And then if you do have a question or a comment, you know, if it's the first question or comment before you jump in, maybe just give us your name and then maybe the name of your loved one, their age, their relation, diagnosis, just for some context. But at the very least, just make sure you introduce yourself and your name. And those are pretty much our group guidelines. And our format this evening is, you know, we have 4 peer panelists here this evening. Two are here representing A Gap in the Forest, and that's Matt and Kate. And two are here representing NAMI West Los Angeles, and that's Jared and Angelique. And I, again, want to thank all four of you for your willingness and openness to be here. I know, first of all, just public speaking, even though this is on Zoom, can be a little nervous making. So I appreciate your willingness and also just your openness to being here and sharing your story. And so the format will be, we're going to have each one of our peer panelists, uh, maybe take about 5 minutes or so and just tell you a little bit about their personal journey as someone who has that lived experience, and just a little bit about really, a little bit of history, their past, some of the challenges, where they are now, and just a little bit about their personal experience. And we'll have an opportunity to hear from all of our panelists. And then we'll just open it up to everyone else that's here. And if you have really any questions, comments, that's why we're here. That's why our panelists are here, to be able to address some of the questions that you may have. And so, feel free, once we open it up to everyone, to jump in and ask. If there's a question that's for a specific panelist, just let us know where the question is directed. If it's a general question for any or all of our panelists, then we'll have an opportunity for maybe a few of our panelists to weigh in as well. So thank you again for being here. And let's see, maybe Angelique, would you be willing to kick us off here? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you could maybe kick us off and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
Of course. Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. So happy to be here with you all. Little bit of background about me. Growing up, I thought I was going to be a pediatrician because I love babies so much and consider myself a baby whisperer. My name is Angelique, and I am not a pediatrician. I'm a substitute teacher and an actress here in Los Angeles, California. I moved here from Brooklyn, New York in December 2018 after graduating from Harvard University. At Harvard, I studied economics, theater, and Spanish, so I speak a little Espanol también. Two strange facts about me: I am a hot wing connoisseur, so I love tasting different hot wings locally and abroad, so I always know where to get the best ones. And my favorite color is gold, as you can tell by the gold in my hair tonight. So a little bit about what happened with me. I grew up in a Black Caribbean household in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, New York. My dad and mom are from Guyana and Suriname, South America, respectively. And I thought we were like the Caribbean Huxtables growing up. Everyone got along. We all loved each other. It was amazing. Brownstone, the whole thing. All until my parents started arguing and fighting a lot, unfortunately. And my older brother was in and out of mental health facilities after a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So that was sort of really the beginning of the journey with opening up more about mental health in my household and within my family. Before that, we didn't really talk about it. It wasn't a thing. There's a lot of stigma surrounding it, unfortunately. But having my parents deal with my brother's journey really helped them open up by the time it came to me starting my own journey with mental health conditions. So what that looked like, because of my brother's challenging mental health journey, I used to try to stay out of the house as much as possible. So I didn't want to be around it. I would throw myself into extracurricular activities. I would pour myself into my schoolwork. So I was a bit of a nerd. And then I would stay in romantic relationships, trying to distract myself from what was going on at home. And, some of that seemed to pay off as I was in a bunch of different clubs, activities. I was in the choir, track, cheerleading. I played the cello at Juilliard for 2 years and got accepted to Harvard. I thought things would be great. However, they were not. Unfortunately, that last strategy of trying to stay in romantic relationships didn't pan out as well. And that dramatic breakup of that relationship, coupled with my parents' ongoing drama and my brother's journey, ultimately led me to my breaking point. I wasn't hanging out with friends as much as possible, doing those activities that I loved. I found myself sleeping a lot or too little, eating little, hyperventilating, and crying randomly for days, then weeks, then months. So my diagnosis was major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, so depression and anxiety. And I didn't want to accept it at first. I was a straight A student. I had good friends, dominated my extracurriculars. I didn't think there was any way I could be diagnosed with those things, but I was. And it was hard. I didn't want to be seen as broken or sick, but the truth was that I was. And it eventually reached the point of not wanting to be here on earth at all anymore. I thought that it was a burden to those around me and that they would be better off if I simply wasn't here anymore, right? So some common negative thoughts that are associated with depression, unfortunately. And it became clear that I needed to embark on a journey toward recovery. So thankfully, again, at 17, I had my parents around when this was happening, and they had a little experience, a little bit of insight from my brother's journey. So they were able to give me a warm handoff to a therapist for the first time. Just opposed to at first. I didn't want to talk to a stranger about my problems. Didn't see the point. Didn't think there was anything that they could tell me. But being a minor, had to do what my parents told me to do. So I was forced to go, and eventually opened up. Therapy was huge to my journey toward recovery. I eventually started opening up and loved having an objective third party to process my thoughts, experiences, and emotions with. I eventually resumed those different activities that I loved. So getting back involved in cheerleading, bodybuilding, my part-time job, and spending quality time with family and friends. It was really important that I had, for example, a faith community around that time. I became a Christian around that time and had really good friends in church who were willing to just hear me out, listen to my experiences, and support me during that time. So threw myself into all of that and all of those joyful activities before I left for Harvard. At Harvard, I continued with therapy and counseling. I tried medication for the first and only time with advice from my doctor. I unfortunately had some side effects. So I had some shaky hands, some dried up tear ducts, so I couldn't cry and I wasn't able to sleep at night, and eventually decided to discontinue medication. And my doctor helped me find other ways and other strategies to deal with the depression, especially, and figuring out a routine. Routine was huge for me, just maintaining a regular exercise schedule. I try to exercise 3 times a week, journaling, regular sleep schedule. I need 7 to 8 hours a night. I think finding a baseline of how I'm doing. So that's reading uplifting faith passages every day for me, and staying connected with my support system. So I realized my parents were a huge part of that, my therapist, close friends, and faith communities that I could go to when things were getting tough. So that helped me progress to where I am today, here on this Zoom, talking to you all, able to confidently share my story, what I lived through and what I'm still living with, even though it's gotten a lot more manageable. Despite my journey with mental health conditions, namely with depression and anxiety, I was able to graduate with honors from Harvard and even received an award for excellence in the arts. After graduating, I worked in law for a little bit and then politics, fighting poverty with Mayor de Blasio's administration. Then moving across the country for my parents was huge. Being able to pursue acting and teaching and becoming a mental health advocate, which wasn't on the vision board, but has been so fulfilling, and getting to, use those different outlets to speak about my journey. As an actress, I've been featured in different publications, gotten to do some short films. I was even a winning contestant on the game show Wheel of Fortune last year. So won 2 vacations and some cash, which is really exciting. So I would say for me, there's definitely hope and help available. Just taking things one day at a time, celebrating my small wins, knowing all I can do is take things one day at a time, do the best I can that day, try again tomorrow. And again, it's been huge just leaning on my support system. So you all are in a great place. So thank you for hearing my story.
Well, thank you, Angelique. Really appreciate you sharing your story. I already have like 5 questions for you, but I want to have all the panelists here, give their story and then open it up for everyone. But I've got a few questions that I'm going to come back around with. But thank you so much for sharing your story and being here tonight. Appreciate it. And Matt, could I ask you to maybe go next? And just just a brief introduction, since I've known Matt for years. Matt is a peer mentor and is very involved with our nonprofit, A Gap in the Forest. He runs our poetry group, our mixed media group. We're about to start a movie club that he runs, and I've known Matt for years, and an awesome, solid dude, and very much appreciative, Matt, of your willingness to be here and share your story. I also know that sometimes the internet's a little spotty where you're at, so if for any reason you freeze up or cut out on us, we'll come back around to you. But I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Okay. I'm Matt. I'm a writer and an artist, and I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I started hearing voices when I was 21, just as I was finishing my BA at university and or college, and shortly after that, I had to move home because I had a total breakdown, a mental health crisis, and I started living on the streets, using street drugs. I'd already had some exposure to narcotics before I started using street drugs, but I had never used hard drugs before. And it started a 10 to 12 year cycle of cycling in and out of psych wards, jails, sober livings, and IMDs. And my mental health condition fueled my drug addiction, and my drug addiction fueled my mental health condition. And because every time I would hear a voice, I would use, and every time I would use, I would hear a voice. And I think the most important thing in maintaining mental health sobriety and sobriety from narcotics is being able to say no and not give in, and maintaining a clean diet and exercising, reading, writing, and art has really helped me find my way back to my emotional and psychic sobriety. Working with collage and working in poetry. It helps me navigate my mental health. Yeah, I think that's about all I have.
Well, I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you so much. And I can tell everyone here, Matt is a really phenomenal poet who has a very unique voice in his poetry, and great collage artist as well. And a lot of his poetry and art is featured in a mixed media book that we're putting together, and just does a great job leading those groups as well. So Matt, thank you for that and for being here tonight and sharing your story with us. And then Kate, could I hand it off to you to tell us a little bit about yourself? Kate, by the way, is on the board of directors of our nonprofit, runs our filmmaking group, and also works as a peer mentor. And I've known Kate for a number of years as well. So appreciate you being here, Kate, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Angelique, thanks for sharing your story. It's always heartening to hear similar threads. And Matt, thanks for sharing too. So I began my journey with mental health when I was about 14 years old. I got in trouble at school for drinking, and I was made to see a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with depression and anxiety. And had prescribed me some pretty heavy duty medications. Although I was obviously going through a troublesome time in my life, this experience changed me. I ended up distancing myself from my friends. I withdrew more from my school activities, and I dropped out of ballet, which was something I'd done since I was 3 years old. My friends and family were worried, but they didn't know what to do. I was getting by in school. I entered college, and during that time, I was introduced to heroin. I hid my addiction from my family, lied to them. I dropped out of college in my 3rd year, and I got into a very controlling and abusive relationship at this point. I'd cut off communication with all of my friends, and my family was deeply troubled by my behavior. The good thing about the controlling relationship was that I ended up getting clean from heroin, although I was doing nothing in my life for a few years. When the relationship ended, I was deep in a pit of codependency, unhealthy habits, and a prescription painkiller addiction. So my family set me up to go to rehab, and I reluctantly went. I got kicked out of there my 7th week and was sent to another rehab, which I found much more helpful for me. There, I stayed clean and learned a better way of life for myself. I got spiritual, and I wanted to be healthier. My life was going well. I got out of treatment, started school again, graduated, then went on to get my master's degree, and I started ballet again. And then I got into another abusive relationship. When that was over, I wound up in a suicide watch in Los Angeles. I was treated for PTSD and then entered a program that focused on how to manage my emotions, which was very helpful. Over the past few years, although life has had its bumps, I've been pursuing my goals and living a life that, for the most part, I'm pretty proud of. Looking back, I wish that I had at least someone or one person to talk to who I felt really listened to me and understood me, instead of feeling like something was inherently wrong with me and needed to be fixed. I also realize now that everyone was doing the best that they could, which I couldn't see at the time. For years, I didn't see how my actions could affect those around me, and thankfully, I now know better. I used to blame the people around me for my pain, and it took a long time to see that I have a responsibility to not self-destruct, largely because of the pain it caused others. I still feel badly about what I put my family and friends through by my actions, but living a good life today is the best way to make up for it and move forward. Even though I didn't feel it at the time, I am so infinitely grateful for the support that my family and friends gave me through those times. Learning to manage my emotions with skills and help from support groups has been one of the most helpful things on my journey. Also, finding purpose and meaning in life has been another vital piece of pursuing a fulfilling life for me. And finally, but not by any means least of all, reconnecting with and building trust again with my family has been so important, even though it took many years and is still in the making. And like I said before, life can still be challenging and heartbreaking and worrisome and hard, as well as wonderful. But I am pretty fulfilled by pursuing my goals and bolstered by my supportive relationships with friends and family. And thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kate, so much for sharing your story and what you have been through over the years. And I can also let everyone know that Kate is really an amazing and gifted director and actress. And for her master's thesis, right? It was your master's thesis. You directed a documentary on dumpster diving, and you're currently directing a documentary on mental health as well. So a lot of talent as well. But thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And Jared, would love to have you jump in next and
Sure.
tell us about your story.
So, for a moment. Well, yeah, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Angelique, for sharing your stories. They're all really inspiring. So my name is Jared. I'm 32 years old from Pacific Palisades, California. My mental health journey began at a really young age when, as a toddler, I was diagnosed with high-functioning autism. Fast forward to middle school and high school, I had heavy social anxiety. As a result of that, I felt incredibly isolated from my classmates and my self-worth plummeted. I looked around at everybody else who just seemed so happy, outgoing, fun, talkative, and then I saw myself and I just felt shy, anxious, scared, and that led to me feeling shame. I kept everything I was going through to myself, and back then, it didn't even occur to me that I was having a mental health crisis, so I didn't reach out for help. As a result of these factors, I suffered in silence for years and dissociated from my shame and my anxiety just to get by. Nevertheless, despite everything that I went through, I was an A+ student in high school with a 4.0 GPA. And in college, at the prestigious UC San Diego, I had 2 wonderful part-time jobs. I had my first girlfriend. I had a 3.57 GPA as a physiology and neuroscience major, and I had some amazing friends. Unfortunately, after college is when my mental health completely fell apart. In high school and college, I was always able to keep myself together by focusing on school. But suddenly, after college, I was thrust into a new world without any structure or direction for my life. After college in 2013, I moved back into my parents', and I lived there between 2013 and 2015. During this time, I became more and more socially isolated and more hopeless about my life. I started to binge eat at night to cope with what I was feeling and developed a full-blown eating disorder. I began to have terrifying delusions in my mind, which felt more real and more compelling than the outside world around me. I became disconnected from everyone and everything and became extremely suicidal. Everything culminated in 2015 when I spent 50 days, 50, at a psychiatric hospital, which, by the way, was a horrible experience. And then I spent 4.5 months at a residential recovery program. I can still remember my first day at the residential like it was yesterday. My parents were meeting with a psychiatrist on staff, and my sister and I were just taking a walk in the neighborhood. The entire time that we were walking and talking, all I could think about was throwing myself in front of a car and taking my own life. Thankfully, I didn't. And then it was my turn to talk to the psychiatrist on staff. And this moment would change my life forever. She asked me a simple question. She asked me if I was feeling suicidal. And I said, yes. And in that moment, I felt this huge wave of relief wash over me because finally it was okay to not be okay. It was okay to be feeling suicidal. And for the first time in 3 long years, I had hope once more. While I was at the residential, I was diagnosed as having schizoaffective disorder, got on the right medication to stabilize my brain, overcame my eating disorder, volunteered at a food pantry, and started to get my life back, to pick up the pieces and to try and create something new for myself. In 2016, I moved back to Los Angeles and enrolled at Santa Monica College, where I would go on to get an associate's degree in liberal arts and humanities with a certificate in Asian studies. And then in 2017, I got a Dean's Merit Scholarship for half of my tuition to go to the University of Southern California, where I went on to earn a master's degree in urban planning. Having that structure in my life from 2016 to 2019, going back to school week after week after week, was absolutely 100% essential to my recovery. And it's the exact structure that I did not have as a 22-year-old graduating from college. Another huge aspect of my recovery has been my involvement with NAMI WLA. I went to my very first support group for people with a mental health condition or diagnosis just like me in August of 2019. And within 3 to 4 weeks, I realized that I had found a community of people who could understand my struggles and I could understand theirs. Fast forward a year later, after religiously attending these support groups, I decided to get trained to be a support group facilitator myself. And since the beginning of 2000, 2021, I've been facilitating 3 support groups a week for NAMI Westside LA. And I've done between 220, 230 support groups up to this point. Being a support group facilitator has given me deep happiness as well as passion, purpose, and fulfillment in my life. It's something I look forward to every single week. I also teach NAMI's peer-to-peer class, which Elizabeth talked about, which is an 8-week course for adults with a mental health condition to better understand themselves and their recovery. And I've also been a youth presenter a few times for NAMI's Ending the Silence program, which goes into middle schools and high schools and talks to teenagers about mental health and about the stigma around mental health, to give teenagers the permission to feel safe to talk about mental health if they need to. Finally, in early 2021, I joined a Toastmasters club with the goal of improving my public speaking skills and learning how to be a public speaker, so that one day I could get on a stage and expand my role as a mental health advocate and share my story of recovery, just to demonstrate that recovery from a serious mental health diagnosis is possible with the right support, and that hope, that ultimate currency that we all need, is real. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate you being here and all the work that you do running the peer support groups and teaching the peer-to-peer classes, and for sharing your story here tonight as well. So thank you, and thank you to, again, all of our peer panelists that are here this evening. And yeah, I'd like to, at this point, really just open it up for all of our participants here, for those of you attending tonight. Any questions that you may have for any or all of our peer panelists. I know I've already got a few, but I definitely would love to open it up to anyone and everyone here this evening. And I might kick it off with a question here for you, Angelique, regarding, well, actually this could apply to all of you, because all 4 of you have college experience, but I was wondering, making that transition to school at a time, and Angelique, I know you mentioned that it was sort of, right on the heels of while you were experiencing some of your initial depression and anxiety, how that transition to college, because on one hand there's some structure and routine there, on the other hand, a lot of pressure, an intense schedule. How did you handle that transition?
Great question. Probably not very well. I was the first one in my family to go to college, so I had no idea what I was doing. All of the routines that I had established before I left worked for my structure at the time and my responsibilities at the time, but pretty much had to reinvent the wheel when I got to college. Thankfully, though, Harvard had different systems in place for sort of general support. So I had like an academic advisor, some type of resident dean who lived in the house, another like peer advisor who like helped me figure out classes and stuff like that. So it was a matter of transitioning some of my old support system into the new support system, which wasn't necessarily directly mental health related at the time, but I think thinking about it now in hindsight, structure is so key. So knowing the different people that I had to be able to talk to, establishing routines, setting up my calendar each week on Sundays to make sure I knew where I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to be doing. And just doing the other things that kept me mentally well, whether that was exercise, journaling, going to church on Sundays, and staying connected to other people.
Gotcha. Very good. Well, yeah, I know that, I mean, listen, under the best circumstances, that transition into college, and then, I think, Jared, you mentioned it on the other side, graduating college, and Kate, I think you kind of said this too, and maybe Matt, you mentioned this too, on the other side, those major life transitions can be really challenging, for sure. So thank you all. We've got some hands up, so I want to hand this off to for some questions. So Haley, I see your hand is up there.
Oh, there you go. I just wanted to say, like, everyone's stories were amazing. I didn't know this about some of the people I already know here. I didn't know certain things that they were sharing. I didn't know what that was about. I never heard any of this about them before, and that was really interesting. And it's actually inspired me to like share later on during this group. So I can relate to what some of the things that people were saying. So thank you, everybody.
Right, thank you, and thank you for being here, Haley. Appreciate it. And Susanna, I see your hand is up there.
Okay. Yeah, hi, I'm Susanna. So my son Peter, he's 21 and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia just a year ago. And by the way, I love that all of you are willing to show up and just share your experiences and what you've done to basically turn your lives around. It's very, very inspiring. What my question is, for a while in high school, he was starting to kind of, be kind of a loner and more difficult to deal with. And then boom, in college, just everything just fell out the window, did poorly academically, stayed at home, and then had his first psychotic episode last year. And that's when he was diagnosed. So he's stable now. He's just barely become just a little bit of vulnerable. I mean, he's become a little bit more vulnerable, telling me that one of his big things is going back out in the public. He doesn't get out of the house that much. And he grew up in the city, and he's, there's this thing about a stigma about meeting people that he's grown up with. They don't know what's happened to him in this past year. I'm just wondering how you guys have dealt with that, or if just what your thoughts are about that.
I think that's a really great question in terms of trying to reconnect with people and build that life back, and how do you explain an absence or not finishing school or other things like that. So I think that's a great question, and any of our peer panelists that might want to jump in here. Yeah, Kate, go for it.
I guess I could try to broach that topic. In terms of the stigma, through like the toughest times, even if I had like one friend, or sometimes like at points music or a movie or a book that I could relate to would get me through. Sometimes it was like that lonely. And yeah, that's a tough one. It's a really tough one, but I think like finding a sort of a purpose for myself was what got me through a lot of that. The tough experiences with stigma, I'd say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Something to give you something resilience to kind of a backup, whether it's a connection, social connection, a purpose. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Jared, go right ahead.
A couple thoughts come to mind. I know I mentioned that I studied urban planning at USC, and then I took a job and I was working for like 7 months as a planner. And I think it got to a point where like my mental health wasn't great. So I just told them that I had a physical health problem, and then they're like, oh, wish you well. So that's kind of how I handled it in that scenario. But in terms of like, I agree with what Kate said about, because I've had up and downs in my life. I have periods where I have the good friends that I want, and then I have periods where like we've moving on and I'm in this in between period where I haven't yet met new people to kind of fill my social circle. And I would definitely agree that having a purpose or having a hobby that, like, if your son has a hobby that he really likes, or if he feels really connected to some type of purpose or something in school, that could help him as well. And then I would also say that in my experience, unless it's a NAMI support group, because obviously everybody has a mental health condition there, so it's easy to talk about. But if it's just out in the world, I know one of my best friends, we met, and it wasn't until maybe like 4 or 5 months in that we randomly had a conversation, and he shared that he had depression. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, I had schizoaffective, and it kind of like made us closer, and it kind of just came like organically, like that opportunity to share. And then with another person, it just came up in conversation many, like a year after knowing him. And I shared that I had schizophrenia, and he was surprised, but he said his grandma had it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's okay to not share it right away, but like over time, you can get to know somebody, and sometimes they'll end up being like that right time to share it, and then I'll make us feel closer to each other.
Actually, can I add another question to that, Adam?
Sure.
So the other question to that is, very few people in our family know about his condition. And as his psychiatrist says, he passes the Macy's test. If he's out in public and you don't deal with him too much, you would never know he has a problem. But when you start having maybe a short conversation, a little bit more than a short conversation, something's not quite there. How do you feel about me telling other family members about what's happening with him? I mean, not all the details, but just kind of what his diagnosis is, and maybe a few very brief things, but nothing too detailed.
Maybe that'd be a good conversation to have with your son.
That's a good point. The thing is, I think he's going to say no.
Okay.
He's going to say no, don't tell anybody. And then there's going to be the awkward stares and pauses and second guessing from his cousins and whatnot. And then he's not going to want to, it's a tricky situation. But good point. Yeah. That trust, right? Yeah. It's a tricky situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a hard thing to navigate, because on one hand, it's, you with your son, that he's got to maybe be comfortable with that. On the other hand, I think, you might be looking to be able to share that, because there may be some support there for you, for your son, for your family as well. But that's a tough one to navigate. Do we have any other of our peer panelists here? Any other thoughts on that?
I think I would say, I think it's a good idea to, see what his perspective is on it, of how comfortable he would be for it, because everyone with lived experience in mental health or with mental health conditions, like, it's a vulnerable thing. And some of us are advocates, we're out here and we're super public with it. We don't mind telling all sorts of people. And other people are a bit more private about it. So I think, gauging his comfort level, 1. Then 2, also just communicating that for loved ones of people with mental health conditions, they need support too. So if you feel like you need to tell a family member for support for yourself as you're trying to support your son, I think that's a completely valid thing for you to bring up and for him to consider as well. So not just telling family members for the sake of it, but if there's an intentional reason to help both him or you, then I think that would be great.
Thank you for all your advice. I really appreciate it.
And Kate, did I see your hand go up really quickly in terms of answering that question as well?
Yeah, I would mimic what Angelique says about that. It's, it's important that you get support for yourself for this, while at the same time sort of, trying to keep that trust and, with your son too. So
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for that. And Mark and Maria, I see your hand is up there, so go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Mark, and Maria's next to me. We're here regarding our son. He's 30 years old. We never got an official diagnosis, but we're assuming that it's bipolar and schizoaffective. And, we've been with Adam for quite a while now, kind of on the path of trying to learn how to deal with everything. But the question that Maria asks almost daily is, what are we missing? What is it that we're missing that we could connect? Because he's non-compliant with, he has anosognosia. He, you know, he has a lot of delusional thinking as far as, somebody's hacking his computer, so forth and so on. And which we've tried different approaches on how to connect. But we just trying to get in the minds of somebody who's on the other side, and how do you not thwart them off? But how do you connect and maybe get them to realize that they might need help? And I guess that's the gist of the question. Like I said, Maria's always asking, what are we missing? What do we need to do? Yeah, what do we do? So I could throw that out there if anybody has any input.
And I want to ask a question too, from you guys. Should I do it now?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you all for being here. I was listening to all your stories and they give a lot of hope. And for us, especially, one of the things that I found very compelling about all of your stories was that you all kept a social connection, you had purpose, you got involved. And we have a son that it seems to get further and further apart from that, no matter what I do. I take him on drives, I go out for lunches, I try to talk to him and set up time, but I am wondering, he was very social, he had a lot of friends, and right now he doesn't have a lot of friends. He's sort of disconnected, to be fair, and all of you seem to be, I think that the structure, the connection, social connection, involvement, and purpose seems to be helping you guys, and we're like at the other end of that. So I guess my question is what kept your focus? Because to me, when I look at you, I pray that my son will reach that point in his life.
I guess the question on top of that question is did you have a realization first and then become social? Because that would be my guess, that there's some revelations going on first, and then the understanding of the need to get out there and have purpose again and socializing.
Right.
So,
And just one other thing, Jacob was very social. He had a lot of friends. He was always doing something, and now he's completely disconnected. So, thank you.
No, really good questions and really important questions as well. And so, if all of our panelists are comfortable, I would actually love to hear from all of you on this in terms of, when you were maybe at whatever we would want to call it, your lowest point, or when maybe you were experiencing your most symptoms, or just at the at the depth of the struggle and the challenge. I guess it's sort of a two-part question. How, for maybe, maybe Mark, your question is a little bit of like, what can the family do, or what did your family do that you actually maybe found helpful? And then maybe sort of Maria's question there being, what was it within yourself that actually helped you kind of maybe lock into something where you found that passion or that purpose or that meaning, and how did you get yourself back on track with that? So I think those are sort of the two components. And yeah, I think these are really, really important questions, and would love to hear from, from all of our panelists if you guys are comfortable answering those questions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go for it, Jared.
I mean, I can sort of answer by filling in pockets of my story that I didn't have time for in the original discussion. But so my lowest was really the psych hospital, 50 days locked up in a building. Didn't trust the nurses, didn't trust anybody there, was super defiant, completely hopeless in the middle of like the worst delusions that I could ever experience, and got discharged, came back home, a couple months, nothing got better. tried a few therapists, didn't really work, didn't take. Just continued to feel really hopeless. And what I can say, what my parents ended up doing was they continued to research, and they ended up finding this residential program in Boulder, Colorado. And that was something they did independently of me and my condition, or what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think what happened eventually was, it was like August of 2015, and my mom just said, "Hey, we're taking you here." It was just kind of like a, "Hey, we're going." And so that was, I went, and I was doing really badly on the way there. I was doing badly that first day. But I guess I just felt like when I got there that the psychiatrist, the staff, the therapist, they seemed to really care. And it felt like it was just such a stark contrast to the hospital. And I don't know what it was about that moment when I was able to say how badly I felt and feel open about that. But, from that moment, I started to kind of begin my journey of like socializing again. We had groups we had to go to at the residential. Like, we had a physical education group, we had therapy groups, we had a support group. We would go to a movie night every 2 weekends. There were chores, cooking and cleaning. We would eat meals together. So I kind of got to start re-socializing myself at the residential. And I had a full 4.5 months at the residential to kind of, like, I guess, get back to learning how to be social and not being by myself all the time. And that really helped prepare me to then like go back to school and be in a class with people. And then from there, I was just trying to, I had enough hope, and I'd gotten stable in the medication enough that then at that point, my parents helped me found an apartment in West LA to live by myself, so that I could have like a healing space for myself, and went to school and just kind of like took things slowly, took things easy. But at least was doing a hobby of mine, which was studying the Japanese language. But kind of a long-winded answer, but I guess for me, my parents, they were the ones who ended up doing the research about the residential. They were the one that they ended up telling me, "Hey, we're going." And they took me there, and I didn't trust it in the beginning, but eventually I opened up. I hope that helps. The residential helped me a lot and helped me to start socializing again.
It helps, but you were a minor at the time?
No, I was probably 25.
And Mark, that was going to be exactly my follow-up, is that, and I'm curious, Jared, so at 25, you could have said no, right? You weren't a minor. You could have said, "I'm not going to Colorado.
Yeah.
No way am I getting on that plane. No way am I doing that." Why didn't you?
It's hard to say. I don't know if I have an answer. It's really hard to say. I guess I just, in that moment, I went along with it, and I'm glad I did.
Can I, I'm sorry to take up so much time for everybody, but I want to ask you a question. I noticed that there are times that we need to treat Jacob, he's 30, as a kid, and there are times to not treat him as a kid. I wonder if that was a moment for you where you were kind of, and I don't mean this to come out badly in any way, but more in the childlike fashion, that your parents were telling you something and you were going along as their son rather than as an adult who's going to challenge them. Was that part of the mindset?
Maybe it was just I was living at home. I wasn't working. I wasn't in school, and yeah, maybe it was kind of like that mindset. Oh, these are my parents, and they're coming in saying, we're taking this trip, and obviously I was 25, so I could have objected, but I guess I went along with it, and I'm glad I did.
Jared, we had sort of a related question in the chat box, that at the time when you were 25 and going to Colorado, at that time living with your folks, did you recognize and appreciate that you were living with a mental health condition at the time?
I think I definitely knew things had changed compared to being in college, just by the way my life had deteriorated at that point. I mean, had no friends anymore, wasn't working, wasn't in school, spending all my time alone, binge eating. I mean, I knew that I was doing things to harm myself, like binge eating every night. I knew that I was going to sleep and hoping that I wouldn't wake up. So I had some sense that I wasn't in a good place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So even if you weren't necessarily like identifying with, hey, this is my diagnosis, this is what I'm, a condition that I'm living with, you were able to recognize that.
To some degree, I mean, with the therapist my parents tried to find for me, I think I was still kind of defiant. When I was at the psych hospital, I spit the medication in the trash can because I just didn't want to take it. So, I was defiant, but I think like I knew I was hurting myself emotionally when I would not eat all day, come downstairs, eat a bunch of junk food, and then feel horrible about myself and go to bed. So I had some awareness that I was hurting myself in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And for any of our other peer panelists here this evening, sort of that same question, what, maybe Matt, if I can put you on the spot, if you're comfortable, maybe addressing sort of that same question, when you shared your story, you talked about, being on the street and using street drugs, and those street drugs causing more symptoms of your mental health condition. And, what was it that, I guess, was that moment where either you recognized that something needed to change, or was there a family member that was instrumental there, and what did they do or say, or what action did they take that made the difference?
I think when I realized that something needed to change, I got in a pretty terrible altercation, and then I got arrested. And my mom was always looking for me, when I was on the street. She was always calling the hospitals, calling the jails, calling the police, just to see if there was any news on me. And from jail, I was taken directly to a psychiatric institution, largely from the influence of my mother. And this happened many times before. This was the last time I was on the street. So and then and I think one of the things about this condition is the utter isolation of it, where you isolate yourself from everyone, all your friends, and you forget who you really are, and it's a process of remembering. It's a process of reminding yourself what you love and what gives you purpose and what gives you hope to continue on, and so in the short term, I think going to the psych ward was helpful. It can be perceived more as a punitive measure, especially among us psychiatric cases, more of a deterrent than an actual tool in recovery. But as far as keeping me off the streets, it did its job.
Made a difference for you, even though it was
Yeah.
a rough road between, like you said, being incarcerated and feeling like a psychiatric hospital was almost a punitive thing, but ultimately, you're saying that's what really helped you turn that corner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for weighing in on that. And I know we've got some more questions, but I think this is such an important question love to hear Kate and Angelique from both of you as well, if you have some thoughts on this. For you, like personally, like Kate, for you when you were, like you said that there was a point where you were in a hospital on suicide watch and in a pretty rough place. What was it that helped you turn that corner, and either from within yourself and then also with your family? What were they, what did they do or say, or what action did they take that maybe helped turn that corner for you?
Yeah, for me, it was a long journey. It took many years and kind of had ups, and it wasn't a straight path for me. But it did get to the point where, I just didn't want to live. I didn't know what else to do, and what helped? Really, at that point, it was like I had the relationship with my family was, I couldn't have been much worse. It was, I think my dad wasn't talking to me for a period of time, and so it took, in terms of help, like they did, I wouldn't have gone to the treatment centers or gotten the treatment programs that I did had it not been for their support. And I think a couple of those really helped me. It helped me, connect with people that I needed to connect with, and I felt like I were helping me. And not every treatment program I went through did that, but there were a couple that really did help me, and helped me get a grasp on my emotions and just being able to live sort of day to day. And then like beyond that, it was sort of finding like a greater meaning as to why I'm getting up every morning and doing life. So I needed to like find that, which took a while. It's sort of a step-by-step thing, and spirituality was a big part for me, because I didn't really believe in much else, but I'm not sure. I just didn't, see the greater anything. And for me, seeing that was a big part in helping me, sort of get my act together, or want to get my act together, and seeing how my consequences affected my family, and repairing that relationship with my family was so challenging and so difficult, and it took a lot of help to do that, and but I'm very thankful for that. And I just didn't see it I just saw so differently. Like years ago, it's black and white, but I think it's these things. And also like exercising for me has been a big thing for my mental health. Like I'm not on medications today, but I'm pretty sure I would need to take medications if I wasn't, exercising regularly. It really affects my my emotions and everything. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, thank you. Appreciate your thoughts and weighing in there. And then Angelique, I'll give you an opportunity also to weigh in here.
Yeah, I can definitely echo what Kate said about finding something and someone outside of myself in terms of maintaining a faith journey. So I think staying in church helped me a ton. I was in church before I left for college. I found the local church once I got there. That faith community has always kept me grounded. It gave me something to look to outside of myself, and thinking that, God put me here for a reason. If I'm gonna let myself waste away with depression and anxiety and not doing anything and not contributing to anything and not being purposeful, what kind of existence would that be for me? So that helped a ton. And then same thing Kate said in terms of family, like the unconditional love and support of my parents, super huge. you know, despite how bad things were or some of the negative thoughts that I was having, that I expressed to them, like they stood by me, they held my hand, they let me know that they would be here, you know, regardless of what I was facing or what I was going through. And it eventually reached the point for me of realizing that I wanted to get better for them. Like, even if I couldn't get better for myself, I wanted to get better for my parents, because I saw how much it was breaking their heart. I saw how hard it was, how much of a toll it was taking on them to see me crying, to see me wasting away in my bed, and realizing that, you know, things didn't change, it will only get worse. So yeah, sort of combination of those two things for me.
Thank you, Angelique. And thank you all. I mean, there were a few common threads there. It sounded like certainly sort of discovering or tapping into some kind of purpose or deeper meaning for all four of you, and something that was really meaningful to you that ultimately allowed you to have some structure and purpose and connect with others. And for a few of you, it sounded like it took you know, a hospitalization and or treatment to get there. Whether I mean, I know Jared, you said it was at least those 50 days in the hospital was a rough experience, understandably. But then you found that treatment center that worked. And Matt, you know, same thing, maybe feeling like it was almost a punitive experience, but ultimately it's something that helped you turn that corner as well. Really do appreciate you guys sharing all this and your thoughts on this. And Shane, I know your hand has been up for a long time over there. Appreciate your patience. But did you have a question for us, Shane? And you were on mute still, so I want to make sure you come off and mute there.
My question is like honestly, like for me, like I don't relate to, like, the reason why I don't go to the NAMI groups or anything is because like I don't relate personally to any mental health thing, because like I'm doing really well mentally, and I take all these meds, and for a long time now, well, yeah, like I just have like these physical symptoms like dizziness, and my psychiatrist said it's called PPPD, which is persistent postural perceptual dizziness, basically like chronic dizziness, and it really affects what I do during the day. So it does affect my mental health, but only like sometimes. But it's like a vestibular thing, and I kind of feel lonely. I feel like, I don't know anyone who has that, or like, yeah, like, cause I know like there's Facebook like supports, but I don't really like that because you can't like communicate with someone, and I feel kind of lonely. And because like, I just don't, like, I connect to myself, but I'd rather connect to people going through the same thing. And also, yeah, like, yeah, like, my question is like, Jacqueline, like, Angelique, sorry, Angelique, my, like, when you were saying like that you felt like you were sick, but I guess later then you felt like you separated yourself from the illness. Like, I just have a question, like, for me, like, that's what I'm trying to do, like, not like separate my identity from the dizziness, but more like, because what's my issue is like, I physically feel unwell, like kind of sick, and I'm trying to like reframe my mind, like use another term, besides feeling like, oh yeah, I feel sick, I can't do this or whatever. Because it, like, I was just wondering, like, how does someone reframe their mind that way? And how does someone also know their thoughts and feelings? Like, because I also don't know my thoughts and feelings because I just have physical symptoms all the time.
So
Yeah,
Shane, it sounds to me like maybe the question is, you know, how, techniques or ways that maybe Angelique, I know you were asking to her,
yeah.
to sort of, be able to manage the symptoms you're feeling, whether they're psychiatric symptoms or physical symptoms, but managing those in a way that you're still able to.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Okay. No, I think we got that. Absolutely. It's a great question, Shane. We'll hand it off to Angelique for the answer there, or her thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 things came to mind. So 1, you're right, vocabulary and self-talk is huge. I know for me, like I said, separating myself from my condition in the sense of like, I don't say I am depressed or anxious or make that my whole identity. I'm someone who deals with depression and anxiety. Like, I'm not a depressed or anxious person. So having some separation there has helped me a lot. Practicing a lot of positive self-talk. And I think coupling that with journaling has also helped. So that helped me processing my thoughts and emotions. At the end of the day, I'll take some time, write down, things that I was grateful for during the day, or sort of just give myself a recap of the day and, see what those things were, see if I can organize things. Or one thing I used to do is carry around a little notebook. So whenever I would have a thought, whether it was happy, sad, anxious, write it down, write down how it made me feel, so that I can go back at the end of the day and process it all together. And then your point about social connection, I think there's definitely different ways to go about it, whether that's, if you don't necessarily connect with the groups, finding some other type of affinity group, whether that's somewhere you can serve, finding one of your passions that you can serve through, serving at, I don't know, something related with children or something related with animals, or a type of fitness class where you can find other people who enjoy the same activity and connect around that. And I think that could be a great possible space to find social connection that doesn't necessarily feel like it's overwhelmingly related to your physical or mental health condition.
Thank you, Angelique. Really great thoughts. Appreciate it. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thanks. That was helpful.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
And Susanna, I see your hand is up there. Go right ahead.
Yeah, this is actually a question for Jared. I saw in the chat box that you've been on clozapine for 10 years, and just wondering, do you feel that when you were switched to clozapine that made a huge difference?
Well, let's see, I'm 32, so I don't think it was 10 actually. I think it's been about 7 or 8, maybe. But anyways, I talked about having like the psychosis and delusions, like it was horrible. And I don't remember whether it was like at the psych hospital. I think it was at the residential when they got me on, we figured out the right dose of clozapine for me. And the delusions started to go away. Like they really started to go away. And I was able to function again, like actually being able to orient myself to the outer world and not just being so overcome by the images and thoughts in my mind. So yeah, I've been on it for maybe 7, 8 years, and I think I got in the right dose of the residential, and it's been incredibly helpful, and I'm still on it to this day.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, clozapine, also known as Clozaril. I put a little bit of basic information up in the chat box. It's it is it's a medication that we see used a lot. It's sort of considered the gold standard of antipsychotic medications. It's also a medication that sometimes almost a medication of last resort, because, and Jared, maybe you experienced some of this, there can be some side effects. Those side effects.
Yeah. So weight gain.
Mm-hmm.
I had weight gain, and also I still deal with this sedation. Like I can't get up early in the morning. My brain just doesn't wake up until 9:30. So it has its unfortunate side effects, but balanced out, it's still great.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I'm glad it's working and it's been so helpful for you. Um, let's see. Diana, I saw that your hand was up a little bit earlier. Did you have a question?
Yeah, but you already asked it.
What's that? Sorry.
You already had asked it.
Oh, it's
I
been
was
asked.
gonna ask Matt and Angelique, yeah. What was it that their parents did that helped them, since they talk about their parents' involvement? And I guess another question could be like, what are the like barriers, or up to what extent could parents help without feeling like they're overbearing or like too involved to the point where they feel like they're being smothered?
It's a great question because I think that that's a challenge for a lot of families, right? Is, you know, how much do they, you know, need to step in and you know, kind of maybe Jared, sort of like your experience where your folks just said, okay, this is happening now and we're doing this. And then, you know, where do parents need to just sort of, you know, maybe what is too much, or, you know, what might be, you know, too overbearing, or you know, have the opposite of the intended effect. So yeah, it's a good, important question. Again, I want to open this up to you know, all of the panelists here, all of our peers, for, you know, maybe just you know, I guess from your perspective, how family members, parents can, you know, maybe frame things or present things or action that they can take that maybe is important for family members to take that step. I know, Matt, you had mentioned that your mom was, um, you know, very involved in trying to, when you were on the street and trying to line up treatment, um, and then Jared, of course, you mentioned that, you know, your folks just said, we're doing this. Um, so, you know, any thoughts on that in terms of where, you know, where a family member can really step in and maybe make a difference, even if maybe at the time it may not be fully appreciated, but that it does make a difference. Any thoughts on that? Kate, I'm going to put you on the spot. Right. I know you said that things were pretty strained with your folks. Is there a moment where they, you know, kind of drew a line in the sand with you that made a difference, or took action?
They did draw a line in the sand when I got kicked out of my first residential treatment center, and I was faced with like an ultimatum. Um, they were willing to support me one more time, um, trying another program, or like I would have been just excommunicated, basically. And that was a shock. Like that really sunk in. And I knew that was a reality. That definitely at the time helped me. You know, it pushed me, and I did really well in the next treatment center. It was a better fit for me in general, but in terms of like looking back, I wish that I had been more understanding of what they were going through because of what I was doing. I just didn't see it at the time. But um, you know, it probably could have gone a bit smoother if my family, I think it was like they felt like they maybe needed to, especially my dad, sort of like teach me a lesson, to get me back on track, versus really trying to understand like what was going on um, with me, which you know, I get it. It's I can't imagine what it would be like being on, you know, my heart goes out to family members who have loved ones who are struggling. But yeah, I think that like just as difficult as it must be sometimes, like to try and keep that openness of understanding, can keep that door open, I guess. But I know every situation's different, and it you know, it might not be applicable to everything, but yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Thank you, Kate. No, I think that's very helpful, and I think it's hard on both sides, right? It's hard to hear that from a family member who's drawing a line in the sand and say this is it or you're out, and it's hard for families, I think, to sometimes to draw that line in the sand for sure. No, but thank you for sharing that. And we're almost out of time, and we have a time for maybe one more question. And Randy, I see your hand is up here, so would love to have you weigh in here. Share
Thank,
your question.
thank you. We're really sorry that we didn't get on in the beginning. Something happened. We could not find it. Anyway, so our son, I'll just try and be brief. He's 39. He had a baby in December. He and his girlfriend are not together, although they still speak. My son lives somewhere in Northern California. We don't exactly know. We only know a little bit because he does speak with his girlfriend, the mother of his child. He experienced after the baby was born. I don't know that he has any voices in his head or anything like that. I never witnessed anything like that, but he won't speak to us at all, and he hasn't for the past about 5 months, unless they're horrible texts or rants that are just, horrible for a parent to hear. I know he loves us, and his brother as well, who's just a couple of years younger than he is, but he's separated himself from all of us. He doesn't know that we talked to him in the beginning about his mania. Was the first thing that we experienced. He went on buying sprees. He was kind of just talking, consistently. And I just, without being near him, without being able to do anything to help him, he knows that we support him. I text him every now and then that I love him and all that, and he knows that. We were very close up until this time. So at what point is there anyone, and I'm not sure you guys aren't that old, but was there some time when you, I guess, hit rock bottom that you thought, now maybe I need my family, or recognize that you need help? This just came on, pretty suddenly. So if anyone has any answers at all, that'd be great.
Thank you for your question, Randy. And I know that's a very tough situation to be in, of course. And I think we don't have a lot of time left in our group tonight to really get into that. But I would like maybe any of our panelists here to maybe share just some of their thoughts on that. Maybe what was that rock bottom? What was that moment? Again, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but Matt, maybe you could weigh in on this. And for you, what was that like for you?
I think rock bottom for me was lying on the pavement on Skid Row and getting up and then having someone whip me in the back with the bike chain. That was when I knew I was done with that kind of life. I wouldn't get arrested until another couple weeks, but I knew that kind of life wasn't going to continue for me, you know, that I really couldn't withstand it anymore, the brutality of it. That was rock bottom for me.
And at that time, Matt, I'm assuming you were really out of touch with your family.
Yeah, I was really out of touch with my family.
Did you know when you were at having that experience, being on the street, and what you just sort of described as that experience and being at rock bottom? Did you know at some level that you could pick up the phone and call a family member and that they would be there for you?
Yeah, I knew at some level that my family would always be there and that they'd be more than happy to hear from me at that point, you know. I just didn't want to admit that I was done, you know.
Mm. So even at that point, you didn't reach out to your family. Like you said, it was another couple weeks, and then you ended up getting arrested, and that was sort of the beginning of the change there for you. Was kind of getting put into the system, so to speak.
Yeah, I had to be put into the system to get back in touch with my family.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, thank you, Matt, for sharing that. And again, would love to hear from everyone and elaborate even further on that, but we are at that time, so we do have to wrap up. But I'm hoping that there will be more opportunities to do forums like this again, and with maybe some of our same peer panelists that are here today, and others as well. And again, really appreciate all of our peers that are here today, sharing your lived experience and in your journey. All of our other participants, family members that are here being a part of this, really appreciate that. Appreciate the questions that you had for everyone. Really important questions. And again, just really thank you all for being here. I believe we have a brief survey, and Elizabeth, you